Once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. But this is no story of hope, love, or happily ever after. This is the tale of a girl whose dreams turned into a curse and whose kindness became her greatest weakness. Cinderella lived in a once beautiful estate, now crumbling and filled with shadows. After her father's sudden and mysterious death, her stepmother took control of the household. Under her cruel reign, Cinderella was reduced to a servant in her own home, forced to clean and cook while her stepsisters laughed and mocked her. But Cinderella was not alone. At night, when the house was silent, she would hear faint whispers echoing from the dark corners of her room. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a trick of her tired mind, but the whispers grew louder, calling her name. Cinderella, they don't deserve you. Make them suffer. Desperation began to take hold. Her once bright eyes dimmed, her hands trembled as she worked, and the whispers became her only solace. They promised her freedom, revenge, and power. One day, a royal messenger arrived with an invitation to the grand ball. The prince was searching for a bride, and every eligible maiden in the kingdom was invited. Cinderella's stepsisters squealed with excitement, while her stepmother sneered at her. "You, go to the ball. Don't be ridiculous," her stepmother spat, throwing the invitation into the fire. As her family left for the ball, Cinderella sat by the cold hearth, tears streaming down her face. The house was silent, but not for long. The whispers returned, stronger than ever. "You don't need them. You have us." The room grew cold, and the shadows around her deepened. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a twisted version of a fairy godmother. Her face was sharp and pale, her eyes gleamed like shards of glass, and her voice was both soothing and sinister. "My dear child," the figure cooed, "why cry when I can give you everything you've ever wanted?" Cinderella hesitated, but the promise of escape and revenge was too tempting. She nodded. The fairy godmother waved her hand, and magic filled the room. Cinderella's rags transformed into a dazzling gown, shimmering like the night sky. Her slippers were made of glass, cold and unyielding. A carriage appeared, its frame built from bones, pulled by shadowy horses with glowing eyes. "Go," the fairy godmother said, "but remember, the spell will break at midnight. And one more thing. The price of this magic is simple. You must return to me after the ball." Cinderella didn't care. She climbed into the carriage, her heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. At the ball, all eyes turned to her. The prince was enchanted, unable to look away. But as he held her hand to dance, he felt a chill run through him. Her touch was as cold as death, and her eyes seemed to hold a darkness he couldn't understand. "Who are you?" he whispered. Before she could answer, the clock struck midnight. The magic began to unravel. Her gown turned to tattered rags, the carriage disintegrated into bones, and the glass slipper she wore cracked with an eerie sound. Terrified, Cinderella fled, leaving behind one unbroken slipper. The prince, obsessed with finding her, ordered a search of the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, back at her home, Cinderella began to feel the cost of the magic. Her once soft skin turned pale and brittle, her veins darkened, and the whispers now screamed in her ears. "You are ours now. You can never escape." When the prince arrived at her home with the slipper, her stepsisters fought to try it on, but the slipper burned their feet, rejecting them. Cinderella was summoned, and when she slipped her foot into the glass shoe, it fit perfectly. But as the prince looked into her eyes, he saw something horrifying. Her pupils were black voids, her smile twisted and unnatural. "This is not love," he said, stepping back in fear. The clock struck midnight once more, and the curse fully revealed itself. The slipper shattered, and Cinderella began to change. Her body twisted and cracked as her form turned monstrous. Her laughter echoed through the house, chilling everyone to the bone. "You wanted me," she said, her voice distorted, "and now you'll have me." forever. The shadows in the room came alive, consuming the prince, the stepmother, and the stepsisters. Their screams filled the air as the house transformed into a living nightmare, its walls pulsating with dark magic. To this day, the estate stands abandoned, overgrown with thorny vines that bleed when touched. Villagers say they can still hear faint whispers and the sound of a woman's laughter echoing through the halls. They call it the cursed house of Cinderella. And if you ever hear whispers in the dead of night, remember, some fairy tales are better left untold.